Grave concerns have been expressed about shelling at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant in Ukraine. Calls are growing for the International Atomic Energy Agency to be allowed to inspect the country's largest nuclear plant, which was captured by Russian soldiers in the early days of the war. And the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has warned that Ukraine will target any soldiers who fire at the plant amid concerns that an explosion could cause a Chernobyl-like event.
Українці, українки і всі європейці, чиє життя вже поставлено під загрозу російським терором. Росія не припиняє своїх шантажистських дій на Запорізькій атомній станції і навколо неї. Провокативні обстріли території АЕС продовжуються. Під прикриттям станції окупанти обстрілюють міста і громади поруч. Прямо на об'єктах станції російські військові ховають боєприпаси і техніку. Де-факто станція замінована. Все це очевидно свідчить про те, що Росія відкидає безпекові вимоги країн Євросоюзу і 15 інших країн, загалом 42, які закликали Росію вивести свої сили зі станції.
We're joined from Ukraine by a journalist, Nataliya Gumenyuk, who's founder of Public Interest Journalism Lab. Nataliya, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you bring us up to speed on exactly what the situation is around the nuclear plant? What kind of fighting and shelling is going on?
I probably need to clarify that the site is under the Russian control, under Russian military control since more or less March. So it's also very important, I should probably argue that it's a bit too late when the International Atomic Agency started to really pay a stronger attention to that. And now demanding to, visit and inspect the site, because that's what's happening is kind of was inevitable. What we hear now that, of course, the front line, it just like this place is more on the spotlight rather than it was before. We do not have, as we understand, the Ukrainian and international media, the access to the town of Enerhodar. It's in the southern Ukraine. However, of course, there is some limited connection to the employees who more or less working there and undergo all the procedures to keep the power plant safe under the Russian gunpoints. So there is the rather, let's say, dubious news. So what we understand that it's true that from the what they claim that there are attacks from the military from the nuclear power plant on the direction of Ukraine, of the Ukrainian controlled territory, and indeed the nuclear site is used as the place to store the military equipment. Again, something I want to, probably stress that we do not have access now to the site, and there is a limited information. However, for instance, my team works now on the project investigating what had happened in Chernobyl during the occupation, in the Chernobyl nuclear power station, and we see it's more or less the same tactics. So there is a lot of material, a lot of equipment is gathered, especially around as it was in Chernobyl, around the power station. So that would be used like a shield from where there won't be attack on the Ukrainian military back, because Ukrainian side, of course, understand that would be dangerous. Just a short comment. We also hear that in the city nearby, Nikopol, there was a fighting, and sometimes the Russians claim that the Ukrainians are fighting. What the employees write with this limited access, sometimes they can pass the message, is that when there is air raid sirens, usually the employees go to the basement and, wait. But they explain that, for instance, sometimes in some cases, the Russian military aren't really hiding. And for them, this would be the sign that sometimes the Russians are launching the attacks themselves, and therefore they are knowing that they are safe.
Well, now, nuclear engineer Norma O'Mahony has been listening to this. Norma, good morning.
Good morning, Pat.
Now, the International Atomic Energy Agency, it doesn't normally do this kind of thing, does it?
No, so I think even the International Atomic Energy Agency, their initial interest in looking at Zaporizhzhia was to do with what we call nuclear safeguards, which is what they are in charge of enforcing. It's what a lot of the international agreements that we have in place to support the movement of nuclear fuel across the world require. And it's essentially checks by a nuclear watchdog, in this case the IAEA, to check that that nuclear material is being put to its intended use. So in this case, checking that it's being used to produce nuclear power and not for any weapons applications.
So the idea that the IAEA would be going in to check whether weapons present on the site, that is not what their normal role would be, but clearly they could ascertain that information on such a visit.
Absolutely. So I don't think that's primarily what they would be looking for if they sent in inspectors, but it is kind of a secondary role. So you'll see for instance, when Fukushima happened, you did have an IAEA presence on site. And that's really just to establish for the international community that we have a good view of what's going on there. In this case, I think they'd be most interested in just figuring out who's in control of the plant at the moment and that it is sufficiently resourced to perform all the maintenance requirements and operational requirements that you might need to operate it safely.
Now, people are concerned that there might be a direct hit on one of the reactors, whether it's a reactor that's functioning or one of those that is not currently working. Is that a scenario which is kind of like a doomsday scenario, or are reactors built in such a way that that could not happen?
An exact answer to that is pretty difficult to gauge, but essentially the type of reactor that they have at Zaporizhzhia is what we call a PWR. So it has a containment structure behind it, which is a very rugged structure, which is primarily built to contain anything that is like if you have a major pressure excursion or anything inside containment, it's primarily designed for that. But they're also designed with the idea of what we would call an external missile in mind. Now, when I say missile, it's not the sort of shells we're talking about in the military context, but for instance, a lot of these would be built beside turbine island setups, and occasionally they have sort of excursive events where they might expel something like a turbine blade. So those containment structures are built to deal with things like that. As to whether they could take a direct hit from, sort of munitions or whatever, I don't think I'm in a position to say, and I'm not sure to what extent that scenario has been modeled by the Ukrainian authorities.